The case of Adnan Syed spans nearly more than 20 years now, who was convicted of first degree murder and sentenced into life for 30 plus years. And the victim in this case was his ex girlfriend Hae Min Lee, who was a Korean American high school student and who was last seen on January 13, 1999. Due to this case being so multifaceted and so complex, it's hard to pinpoint down who precisely committed the murder. Adnan Syed obviously being locked up for around 20 plus years now. It is difficult to say whether he is innocent or not, but I believe through the Serial podcast that he is indeed innocent. It's incredibly important to understand the nature of Adnan Syed and Hae Min Lee's relationship. It wasn't really fixed and rigid by the end. They had difficulties, they broke up and they got together multiple times, and Hae Min Lee's immaturity of what really love is really came to be evident through her journal, where she states that she's fallen in love with a new person, when this contradicts her whole notion of what love is in her beginning journal, when she's talking about Saeed and how much she loves him to death and she would do anything for him. It's integral to understand this because it was not an abusive relationship, but it wasn't really a well managed, this romantic, lovely relationship either. So it was almost like in the middle. So there wasn't really any specific reason as to why they would cause that. There would be such a huge conflict that Adnan Syed would literally go out of his way to murder his own girlfriend. It's almost illogical within the pre-established relationship they had for a long time, and what their peers and what their friends and best friends said about their relationship and how much they loved each other. But it was also not a perfect, quote unquote, perfect relationship either. Talking about friendships and relationships and who Sarah Koenig interviews in her podcast, she says, quote, and it was 1999, so they had to do it without the benefit of text or Facebook or Instagram, end quote. So meaning that majority of everything that's been said throughout the interview is really anecdotal. It's based on what they recall, and memory isn't the best quantitative evidence that you can provide. It's really, really vague. You can't precisely pin it down to something where you can actually evidently showcase to the courtroom. So it's very much like an opinion that's almost baseless because there's no supporting evidence. Criminalizing Adnan Syed for 30 plus years in jail for a murder that he might or might have not committed because of the lack of evidence provided, empirical, quantitative evidence that can really be, shown exactly to court and really pin down who committed the murder, is just not there. It's almost ridiculous when you take in context that Jay was there. He recalled the day and what happened, even though he told fabricated narratives of what happened that day, and he contradicted himself, meaning that he's the only person who actually accepted and conceded to knowing what happened, that he got murdered, and he told this fabricated story to ultimately get away with it. In the Canadian Bill of Rights and the American Constitution, there's this practical, logical phrase that you've heard throughout your whole life: innocent until proven guilty. And in Adnan Syed's case, there's no reason for him to be convicted for a murder when the evidence isn't there, when it's just all anecdotal, when it's all based on a person's recollection of what had happened, when it's just based on interviews and there's no solid concrete evidence there. And because of the lack of this, I do not think that he should really be put on trial and then be convicted of 30 plus years. There should be an ongoing investigation, and it should be for as long as it can be, so that there's this concrete fact that you can actually put him behind bars. And in this case, Jay would be the one that's actually admitted to doing what he did, and this was murdering Hae. Due to the lack of evidence against Adnan Syed, literally killing his own ex-girlfriend. I think he is innocent, and that the evidence is just not sufficient enough, and that there should be more, something more empirical like DNA testing, something along those lines to actually criminalize him for the murder. Otherwise, he is innocent until proven guilty, and Jay should be behind bars for what he did, as he has admitted to knowing what happened that day. External sources used for this mini YouTube podcast was Koenig's Hero Serial Season 1 Episode 1 The Alibi, that can be found on YouTube. Koenig's Hero Serial Season 1 Episode 12 What We Know, which can be found on YouTube as well.